Today, we are going to look at the most horrific Karen deaths ever recorded, from entitled shoppers whose need for dominance triggered deadly stampedes, to corporate bullies whose road rage sent them careening into concrete reality at highway speeds. It was December 15th, 2013, and the Best Buy electronics store in Atlanta hummed with pre-holiday shopping activity as customers browsed the latest gadgets and televisions. The 45,000 square foot showroom displayed wall-mounted TVs of every size, while sales associates helped families choose entertainment systems for their holiday celebrations. The customer service desk already showed signs of holiday stress, with returns and exchanges creating longer than usual wait times. Carol Johnson wheeled a massive box containing a 65-inch LED television toward the returns counter, her face set in the determined expression that Best Buy employees had learned to dread. At 44, the retail manager had ironically become the store's most notorious customer, exploiting return policies with the precision of a legal scholar and the persistence of a debt collector. Her home office contained detailed spreadsheets tracking return periods, warranty terms, and manager contact information for every major retailer in Atlanta. Carol had been returning the same model television to Best Buy every few months for over 2 years, claiming various defects to secure full refunds before purchasing identical replacement units. Store employees recognized her elaborate scheme, but were required to process returns that technically met policy requirements, despite their suspicions about her fraudulent activities. Her pattern had cost the store thousands in restocking fees and damaged merchandise write-offs. She had perfected her performance over dozens of returns, memorizing corporate policy language and practicing her outraged customer routine in front of her bathroom mirror. Carol's neighbors had grown suspicious of the constant delivery trucks arriving at her house, followed by her mysterious trips to various electronics stores with identical boxes. The electronics manager, familiar with Carol's history, requested additional documentation for her 6th TV return of the year. Carol's voice rose to a volume that attracted attention throughout the electronics department as she accused the staff of discrimination and threatened to post negative reviews across every social media platform and review website. Her face flushed red as she pulled out her phone, waving it menacingly while reciting corporate policy numbers she had memorized specifically for these confrontations. Carol grabbed the 80-pound TV box to demonstrate the obvious defects she claimed had appeared, dragging the heavy package onto the counter with effort. Fueled by anger, she tried to lift the front end of the box high enough to show the damage to the manager. Her arms shook violently under the weight, the cardboard flexing as she struggled to keep her grip. Mid-rant, her sweaty hands slipped. The 80-pound box toppled forward off the counter, striking her shoulder and forcing her violently off balance. Carol stumbled backward and lost her footing on the tile floor, falling hard and striking the back of her head. The combined impact of the box and her fall caused a loud, sickening crack that echoed through the electronics department. She lay motionless, her arms twitching. The fall had fractured her cervical vertebrae and severely damaged her spinal cord, leaving her unable to breathe on her own. Employees rushed to lift the box off her and called 911, but Carol went into cardiac arrest minutes later and was pronounced dead shortly after paramedics arrived. Investigation revealed her extensive return fraud scheme, with records showing she had illegally returned over $30,000 in merchandise across multiple stores using fabricated defect claims. Best Buy implemented new return tracking systems and policies to prevent similar fraud schemes, while Carol's death was ruled accidental despite her criminal activities. The incident became a training case for retail workers about the importance of following return policies while maintaining safety protocols, and her estate faced criminal charges for the fraudulent return scheme that had consumed her final years. It was October 8, 2015, when Susan Rodriguez's dedication to her children's education would lead to an unthinkable tragedy at Lincoln Middle School in Boise, Idaho. Susan Rodriguez was the kind of parent every school administrator dreaded encountering. The 43-year-old mother had developed a reputation as the school's most demanding and theatrical complainant, someone who seemed to thrive on creating drama and making scenes to get her way. While she claimed to advocate for students, her real motivation appeared to be the attention and sense of power she gained from intimidating school staff and disrupting normal operations. That evening, Susan had arrived a full 90 minutes before the scheduled school board meeting. True to form, she immediately launched into her attention-seeking routine, cornering the principal and demanding immediate changes to the lunch menu while threatening media exposure over food quality concerns. Her voice echoed through the hallways as she criticized the school's technology policies in front of other parents, performing for her audience as she declared the administration was failing their children and demanded a complete policy overhaul. When staff reminded her the meeting hadn't officially begun, Susan dramatically insisted her concerns were too important to wait. With her usual flair for theatrics, she demanded an immediate audience with the superintendent, pulling out her phone to film herself making accusations against school staff. These videos quickly found their way to social media, where she claimed the school was covering up serious issues, another calculated move in her ongoing campaign to position herself as the school's self-appointed watchdog. What Susan didn't fully grasp was the dangerous environment surrounding her that evening. Lincoln Middle School was in the midst of major renovations, with scaffolding and construction equipment scattered throughout the building. Construction workers had spent the day installing new lighting fixtures in the ceiling above the main hallway where Susan now stood. At 6:20 p.m., as Susan reviewed her presentation materials in the hallway outside the meeting room, she heard an ominous cracking sound from above. The renovation work had weakened a section of the ceiling tile, and the combination of the new lighting fixtures' weight and compromised structural integrity created a deadly hazard. The ceiling tile, along with a heavy light fixture, plummeted approximately 12 feet from above. Susan had no time to react as the debris struck her head and shoulder with devastating force. The impact knocked her unconscious immediately, causing a fractured skull and severe neck injury. Other parents and school staff rushed to help, calling 911 within minutes. Susan was quickly transported to the hospital where medical teams fought to save her life. Despite their efforts, she succumbed to complications from her head injury 2 days later. The investigation that followed revealed a sobering truth. Proper safety protocols had not been followed during the renovation work. The school district was forced to confront the reality that its oversight had contributed to a preventable tragedy. Susan's death sparked immediate changes. The school was temporarily closed for comprehensive safety inspections, and the district implemented new safety requirements for all construction work in occupied buildings. Her family, channeling their grief into purpose, worked with the district to establish safety guidelines that were adopted district-wide. Susan Rodriguez's story serves as a stark reminder that even the most routine activities can turn deadly when safety protocols are ignored. Her legacy lives on in the enhanced safety measures that now protect countless other parents and students throughout the district. It was September 8, 2018, when Danica Wells' road rage obsession would send her SUV flipping through the air at 75 miles per hour on Interstate 75 in Atlanta, Georgia. Danica, a 41-year-old corporate compliance officer standing 5 feet 6 inches tall, had weaponized her enforcement authority into a personal crusade against anyone who challenged her rules. Her black SUV was equipped with dash cams, custom horns, and compliance officer decals that justified her highway vigilante behavior. Danica specialized in policing other drivers like subordinates, having received 3 citations for aggressive driving while filming motorists for violations. Her LinkedIn showcased posts about holding people accountable and teaching respect to insubordinate individuals. That Friday morning had been productive for Danica's power complex. She had fired 2 employees, posted rants about teaching respect to workers, and was taking prescription stimulants without medical supervision, amplifying her aggressive personality. Danica's signature highway intimidation involved pulling alongside vehicles to scream at drivers while maintaining high speeds, using her corporate authority to justify dangerous confrontations. She believed her compliance position gave her jurisdiction over every driver. When a compact Honda merged in front of her SUV during rush hour, Danica launched into her highway tirade. She began aggressively tailgating while honking and flashing high beams, filming the alleged violation for social media content. Unable to contain her enforcement obsession, Danica pulled alongside the Honda at 75 miles per hour and began screaming through her window about proper merging procedures. She swerved dangerously close while gesturing wildly, trying to force them off the road. Danica's need to maintain her confrontational filming stance created tunnel vision. She became consumed with punishing the other driver, focusing entirely on her power trip rather than highway safety. Traffic ahead had stopped for construction work, with orange cones and concrete barriers clearly visible. But Danica was too obsessed with her enforcement performance to notice the dangerous situation developing. Maintaining 75 miles per hour while screaming about teaching driving lessons, Danica's SUV struck the concrete construction barrier with devastating force. The impact launched her 4,000-pound vehicle into the air, causing it to flip 3 times before crashing upside down. Danica's body was thrown around the interior during the violent flipping sequence. Her spine severed at multiple points while her skull fractured against the roof. Internal organs ruptured from deceleration forces as twisted metal crushed her 140-pound frame. Emergency responders found Danica's SUV destroyed and her body lifeless in the wreckage. Her dashcam footage captured every moment of her final road rage incident, showing her aggressive behavior directly causing the fatal crash. The driver she had been harassing provided witness testimony describing Danica's escalating aggression. Despite being traumatized by witnessing her death, they required counseling for survivor's guilt. Danica's dashcam footage went viral when released by authorities, showing her screaming threats while ignoring traffic safety. Online reactions were unsympathetic, with comments like "Compliance Karen couldn't comply with driving laws" flooding social media. Her employer faced scrutiny when Danica's history of abusing authority emerged. The company implemented mandatory anger management training for compliance officers and reformed enforcement policies. Danica Wells died trying to enforce rules on others while ignoring them herself, proving concrete barriers don't care about corporate authority. It was June 3, 2018, and the original Starbucks location in Seattle's Pike Place Market buzzed with its usual mix of tourists and coffee enthusiasts. The historic coffeehouse's exposed brick walls and vintage fixtures created an authentic atmosphere, while baristas worked behind the curved counter, crafting drinks for customers who lined up to experience the birthplace of the global coffee empire. The afternoon crowd included business professionals, students, and social media influencers documenting their Seattle experience for their followers. Jennifer Clark positioned herself strategically near the pickup counter, her phone already live streaming to her 1,200 followers as she prepared for what she expected to be her most viral confrontation yet. At 35, the social media manager had built her online presence by posting daily videos of herself, exposing poor customer service and confronting workers who failed to meet her standards. Her Instagram account featured dozens of videos showing her berating minimum wage employees, while her followers cheered her on in the comments. Jennifer had developed a systematic approach to creating viral content, deliberately ordering complicated custom drinks and then escalating minor mistakes into major confrontations. She carried a ring light and phone tripod to ensure professional quality footage of her public meltdowns, treating each incident like a carefully choreographed performance designed to generate maximum engagement and outrage. Her complicated order, a venti iced skinny vanilla latte with oat milk, extra foam, light ice, 2 pumps of sugar-free vanilla, and cinnamon powder, had been prepared by a nervous teenage barista who accidentally used regular vanilla syrup instead of sugar-free. Jennifer saw this as the perfect opportunity to create content that would trend across multiple platforms while simultaneously destroying the young employee's confidence. Jennifer climbed onto a wooden chair and then onto a small cafe table to get the perfect camera angle, while live streaming her tirade about unacceptable service standards to her growing audience. Her followers flooded the chat with fire emojis and encouragement as she gestured wildly, pointing at the terrified barista while delivering a scathing monologue about millennial work ethic and customer service failures. The antique cafe table, designed for coffee cups rather than supporting a 140-pound adult, began to wobble under Jennifer's animated movements. She was so focused on her performance and the positive feedback from her livestream audience that she ignored the creaking sounds and unstable surface beneath her feet. The table collapsed suddenly, sending Jennifer crashing into the antique glass pastry display case below. The impact shattered the old glass into large, jagged shards, one of which sliced deep into her neck and severed her carotid artery. Blood sprayed across the white tile floor as her phone continued live streaming, hundreds of followers watching in shock as her final moments played out in real time. The teenage barista, whom she had been humiliating, screamed and ran to get help while customers called 911. Paramedics arrived within 4 minutes, but but couldn't control the arterial bleeding caused by the glass shards embedded in Jennifer's neck. Her live stream captured her final gasps as she died on the Starbucks floor, surrounded by broken glass and spilled coffee. Jennifer's death went viral for all the wrong reasons, becoming a cautionary tale about social media obsession and the dangers of treating real people as content for online entertainment. The teenage barista quit her job and required months of counseling after witnessing the traumatic death, while Starbucks implemented new policies about customer behavior and installed safety barriers around all display cases. It was June 12, 2015. And the vibrant Saturday morning atmosphere of a downtown farmers market in Portland filled the square with the sounds of live music, chattering vendors, and families enjoying the Pacific Northwest's finest local produce. The weekly market featured over 80 vendors selling everything from organic vegetables to artisanal cheeses, creating a 2-acre outdoor marketplace that attracted thousands of health-conscious shoppers each weekend. Beverly Chen adjusted her reusable hemp shopping bags as she surveyed the market stalls with the intensity of a military strategist planning an assault. At 45, the yoga studio owner had transformed her interest in healthy eating into an obsession with pure organic food that she believed was the only safe nutrition available in a world she saw as deliberately poisoned by corporate agriculture. Her conversion to extreme organic-only eating had begun 3 years earlier, after reading conspiracy theories about pesticide use that convinced her that conventional farming was part of a plot to sicken the population. Beverly's weekly farmers market visits had become increasingly confrontational as she appointed herself the unofficial food purity police, lecturing other shoppers about their choices and harassing vendors about their farming practices. She carried a notebook filled with the names of farms she had researched online, cross-referencing each vendor's claims against her extensive database of approved organic producers. Her aggressive questioning had led to several heated arguments with farmers, who she accused of lying about their growing methods. The yoga studio Beverly owned had lost half its students over the past year, as her extreme dietary beliefs began influencing her teaching. She would interrupt classes to lecture students about the dangers of non-organic food, and had banned anyone from bringing conventional snacks into her facility. Her own health had deteriorated significantly due to her restrictive eating patterns, but she refused medical treatment, claiming that doctors were part of the conspiracy to promote unhealthy food. Beverly's family had staged an intervention 6 months earlier, concerned about her dramatic weight loss and increasingly paranoid behavior. She had cut contact with relatives who wouldn't adopt her extreme dietary restrictions, viewing their concern as evidence that they had been brainwashed by corporate food propaganda. That morning, Beverly discovered that one of her trusted vendors was selling both organic and conventionally grown produce from the same booth, a practice she viewed as contamination of pure food with poisonous chemicals. She began her confrontation quietly, questioning the farmer about his growing methods while other customers browsed his selection of summer vegetables. When the farmer explained that he grew both organic and conventional crops to serve different customer needs, Beverly's voice rose to a shout that could be heard throughout the market square. She screamed about people being poisoned, pointing at the conventionally grown tomatoes as if they were radioactive waste. Beverly began grabbing conventional vegetables from the display and throwing them at other customers, screaming warnings about pesticide contamination, while the farmer tried to calm her down. Market security approached as her behavior became increasingly erratic, but Beverly was beyond reasoning as her obsession with food purity reached a breaking point. In her rage, Beverly grabbed the vendor's metal canopy support pole, intending to use it as a weapon against what she saw as the forces of food contamination. The heavy aluminum pole was unwieldy in her malnourished hands, and as she swung it wildly, she lost her balance and slipped on the vegetables she had thrown across the ground. Beverly fell backward with tremendous force, still gripping the pole as the canopy frame tipped with her. Both struck the pavement together, and the metal bar hit her head on impact, causing a fatal skull fracture. She never regained consciousness among the scattered organic produce she had been defending, her body surrounded by the vegetables she believed were humanity's salvation. Beverly Chen was pronounced dead at the scene at 10:15 a.m. from massive head trauma. Market staff later confirmed that she had refused all medical care leading up to the incident despite warnings about her deteriorating health. It was November 15th, 2016, and the crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves across the parking lot of Maple Grove Elementary School in Minnesota. The school auditorium buzzed with tension as nearly 150 parents, teachers, and board members filled the folding chairs, their voices creating an anxious murmur that echoed off the 20-foot ceiling. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the institutional beige walls decorated with student artwork. Susan Hutchinson adjusted her stack of printed research articles as she prepared for what she considered her most important presentation yet. At 49, the pharmaceutical sales representative had become a familiar presence at every school board meeting over the past 3 years. Known for her persistence and increasingly forceful positions, she often cited medical terminology and research articles to support her arguments. Her background in pharmaceutical sales lent her authority when she spoke, though her interpretations of the studies she referenced were often incomplete. Over time, her advocacy campaigns led to several staff departures and curriculum changes, prompting concern among teachers and administrators. What began as parent involvement gradually grew into a cycle of conflict that left the school community divided. Her latest crusade involved demanding the complete removal of all technology from classrooms, claiming that Wi-Fi signals caused irreversible brain damage in developing children. She had spent weeks preparing tonight's presentation, complete with cherry-picked studies and inflammatory rhetoric designed to terrify other parents into supporting her cause. Susan's own children had become increasingly isolated as other families avoided association with her extremist views. Teachers walked on eggshells around her kids, afraid that any perceived slight would trigger another of Susan's explosive confrontations with the administration. As Susan began her impassioned speech about the dangers of wireless technology, her voice grew increasingly shrill and her gestures more erratic. She had been experiencing severe chest pains and shortness of breath for weeks, but attributed her symptoms to the school's wireless network, rather than the chronic stress of her constant outrage. She raised her voice, waving papers frantically, and insisting Wi-Fi signals were harming children. Her face had turned bright red, and sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool evening temperature, as she continued her presentation about the alleged dangers of wireless technology. Suddenly, Susan clutched her chest with both hands, her eyes widening in terror as crushing pain radiated down her left arm. She stumbled backward from the podium, her breathing turned shallow. Between strained gasps, she repeated that the Wi-Fi was making her sick before collapsing onto the auditorium floor as board members and parents rushed to help. She suffered a massive heart attack linked to chronic hypertension and stress. Despite the quick response of paramedics, Susan Hutchinson was pronounced dead at Maple Grove Hospital at 9:23 p.m., her final words being demands that the Wi-Fi was killing her. The autopsy revealed severe coronary artery disease exacerbated by chronic stress and hypertension. Her group faded, and the board emphasized respectful debate at future meetings. The school board also established a mental health awareness program for parents struggling with education-related anxiety. It was June 3, 2013, when Patricia Chen's relentless pursuit of food safety truth would lead to a horrific end at Eugene, Oregon's downtown farmers market. Patricia Chen, a 47-year-old food blogger, had made exposing questionable vendor practices her personal mission. Known for her abrasive interrogation style and complete disregard for social boundaries, Patricia had earned a reputation as the market's most dreaded visitor. Vendors would cringe when they spotted her approaching, knowing she would monopolize their time with aggressive questioning while driving away paying customers. Her blog followers praised her dedication, but those who encountered Patricia in person found her insufferably self-righteous and confrontational. She treated every vendor interaction like a criminal investigation, showing zero empathy for small business owners trying to make a living. That Saturday morning, she arrived with her laptop, ready to document what she suspected were fraudulent organic certifications at the bustling market. Patricia cornered an organic produce vendor for a grueling 20 minutes, loudly questioning his certification credentials and demanding to see documentation, while frustrated customers formed a growing line behind her. Her voice carried across the market as she announced she was exposing fraudulent organic claims and threatened to report him to state agriculture authorities. When the vendor politely asked her to lower her voice, Patricia declared she had every right to protect consumers from his lies and began filming him without permission. She blocked other customers from approaching the stand, completely oblivious to their mounting frustration. as she continued her interrogation. Market management approached her multiple times, requesting she move along, but Patricia dismissed them with the same arrogant attitude that had made her so many enemies. Her tunnel vision and obsessive need to be right blinded her to everything else happening around her. At 10:30 a.m., Patricia moved behind the delivery truck to photograph produce boxes, her attention completely focused on her camera screen. The same obsessive focus that made her so insufferable now put her in mortal danger. The driver, unable to see her in his blind spot despite having mirrors, began backing up. The truck's backup alarm had malfunctioned, but even if it had worked, Patricia's history showed she rarely paid attention to anything that didn't serve her investigative agenda. She remained absorbed in her documentation, unaware of the truck moving toward her until it was too late. The truck's rear bumper struck Patricia with devastating force, knocking her to the ground and causing multiple fractures. The rear wheel rolled over her lower torso before the driver realized what had happened and stopped. Patricia suffered severe internal bleeding and went into shock, but remained conscious, unable to move from where she lay. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes of the accident and provided immediate medical attention, but her injuries were too severe. Despite their rapid response, Patricia died from internal bleeding while being transported to the hospital, her final investigation ending in tragedy. The farmers market immediately implemented new safety protocols, including designated vehicle routes and mandatory spotters for all deliveries. They installed backup cameras and proximity sensors on all delivery vehicles to prevent similar accidents. The truck driver faced vehicular manslaughter charges but was ultimately found not criminally liable due to the equipment failure that disabled the backup alarm. Patricia Chen's death became a tragic reminder of how obsessive behavior and disregard for surroundings can have deadly consequences. It was November 11th, 2015, when Aaron Lockhart's elitist entitlement would trigger a deadly stampede at a Seattle Whole Foods that would crush her beneath the very people she despised. Aaron, a 44-year-old luxury real estate agent standing 5 feet 7 inches tall with platinum blonde hair, had built her career around exclusivity and looking down on anyone she deemed unworthy. She drove a white Mercedes and carried business cards listing her million-dollar sales to establish superiority over common folk. Aaron specialized in policing who belonged in upscale spaces, having previously gotten families removed from restaurants and demanding stores create premium customer lines. Her Instagram showcased her lifestyle while mocking poor people, accumulating followers who encouraged her classist behavior. That Black Friday morning had been productive for Aaron's superiority complex. She had posted stories ridiculing Target families, demanded a Starbucks barista be fired, and live-streamed herself lecturing a pregnant woman about shopping etiquette. After champagne brunch, Aaron arrived at Whole Foods emboldened by alcohol and social media encouragement. She had boasted about educating peasants about their place, carrying her phone to document confrontations for devoted followers. Aaron's signature tactic involved physically blocking customers she deemed unworthy from accessing premium products while filming encounters. She used her height, designer clothes, and condescending tone to make families feel unwelcome in her territory. When the Rodriguez family approached the last organic turkey, Aaron swooped in like a predator. She began her tirade about being a premium customer while filming the family, particularly targeting the elderly grandmother who moved slowly and spoke limited English. Unable to accept that common people deserved the same products, Aaron physically grabbed the turkey while screaming about organic standards. When Mrs. Rodriguez maintained her grip, Aaron's entitled rage reached dangerous levels. In her fury to wrestle the turkey away while filming, Aaron made aggressive backward movements near the olive oil display. Her designer heels and alcohol-impaired balance made her increasingly erratic as she refused releasing either turkey or phone. Aaron's violent struggling caused her to fall backward into stacked olive oil bottles, creating a devastating domino effect. Glass exploded as multiple shelving units collapsed, the sound echoing like gunshots. Panicked shoppers, thinking they were under attack, rushed toward exits in a human stampede. Aaron lay trapped beneath fallen shelving and broken glass as terrified customers trampled over her during their desperate escape. The 140-pound agent suffered severe carotid artery lacerations from shattered glass, while sustaining massive skull trauma from falling canned goods. Approximately 15 customers stepped on her body, crushing her ribcage and puncturing her lungs. Erin's final moments were spent clutching the organic turkey she died fighting for, her blood mixing with olive oil on the floor. Her phone continued recording the chaos she created, capturing her own death. Paramedics found Erin in cardiac arrest with massive blood loss. 20 minutes of resuscitation failed as she had lost too much blood from her severed artery. Security footage showing Erin's entitled behavior causing the stampede went viral. Online reactions were brutal, with comments flooding social media mocking her death over groceries. 3 customers required hospitalization for stampede injuries. The Rodriguez family received death threats from Erin's followers until accounts were deactivated, requiring police protection. Whole Foods implemented crowd control measures and reinforced shelving. Erin's firm discovered her history of discriminating against clients, leading to investigations and her name being removed from properties. Erin Lockhart's death became a cautionary tale about how classist entitlement can have deadly consequences. It was April 15, 2014, and the morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Children's Hospital in Phoenix, Arizona, as dozens of protesters gathered with their handmade signs and megaphones. The 200-bed medical facility had become ground zero for a growing anti-vaccine movement, with demonstrators blocking sidewalks and harassing families seeking medical care for their children. The smell of hot asphalt mixed with exhaust fumes from idling cars as parents tried to navigate around the increasingly aggressive crowd. Cheryl Brennan adjusted her vaccines kill sign as she surveyed her followers from her position near the emergency entrance. At 43, the administrative assistant had transformed from a quiet office worker into the self-proclaimed leader of Arizona's most vocal anti-vaccine group, after spending countless hours reading conspiracy theories on obscure websites. Her conversion had begun 2 years earlier, when her youngest daughter developed a fever after routine immunizations, an event that Cheryl became convinced was evidence of a massive medical conspiracy. Cheryl's weekly protests had grown from a handful of concerned parents to nearly 50 dedicated followers who hung on her every word about the dangers of childhood vaccines. She had convinced dozens of families to avoid immunizing their children, leading to 3 separate measles outbreaks in local schools that had forced temporary closures. Her own 3 children had been expelled from their elementary school after she refused to provide required immunization records, forcing her to homeschool them using curriculum that reinforced her anti-medical beliefs. The hospital's security team had grown accustomed to Cheryl's increasingly aggressive tactics, which included following doctors to their cars and shouting at nurses through the facility's windows. She carried a bullhorn everywhere and had memorized dozens of debunked studies that she would cite during her confrontations with medical professionals. Her husband had left her 6 months earlier, taking their children and citing her dangerous obsession as grounds for divorce. That morning's protest had attracted local news coverage after Cheryl announced plans to physically block the hospital's emergency entrance during peak hours. She had spent the previous evening preparing inflammatory speeches and coordinating with her followers through encrypted messaging apps that she believed protected them from government surveillance. As the morning progressed, Cheryl positioned herself directly in front of the emergency bay doors, her followers forming a human chain that prevented ambulances from accessing the facility. When a paramedic unit arrived with a 7-year-old boy experiencing a severe asthma attack, Cheryl refused to move despite desperate pleas from the medical crew. Witnesses later said Cheryl shouted through her bullhorn, accusing the hospital of harming children as she blocked the ambulance's path. The child's mother could be seen pleading from inside the vehicle, but Cheryl refused to move, convinced she was protecting the boy rather than preventing treatment. In her frenzy to stop the ambulance, several of Cheryl's supporters helped lift her onto the hood of the vehicle as cameras rolled. She climbed toward the roof, gripping the metal light bar while shouting through her bullhorn. The surface was slick with early morning dew and vibration from the idling engine, and her sneakers slipped against the smooth fiberglass. As she tried to steady herself, she lost her footing and fell backward, striking the back of her head on the pavement near the curb. Witnesses saw her briefly twitch before going still. Paramedics immediately began resuscitation efforts and rushed her inside the hospital she had been blocking, but she was pronounced dead within minutes from severe traumatic brain injury. Cheryl Brennan's death stunned the crowd gathered outside. Within days, attendance at the protests dwindled, and several of her followers publicly distanced themselves from the movement she had led. The boy with asthma was successfully treated and made a full recovery. It was November 18, 2014, and the fluorescent lights of the Jacksonville Walmart Supercenter buzzed overhead as Black Friday shoppers began their early holiday preparations. The massive 180,000-square-foot store hummed with activity as customers navigated aisles stocked with seasonal merchandise, while cashiers prepared for the upcoming shopping frenzy. The customer service desk already showed signs of stress with returns and exchanges, creating long lines of frustrated shoppers. Linda Davis wheeled her overflowing shopping cart toward the checkout lanes, followed by 3 additional carts she had strategically positioned throughout the store during her 6-hour shopping expedition. At 39, the part-time bookkeeper had transformed extreme couponing into a full-time obsession, spending over 40 hours per week organizing deals and planning elaborate shopping trips that she documented on her blog. Her dining room table had been converted into a coupon command center with filing systems that would impress corporate accountants. Linda had been banned from 3 other Walmart locations for aggressive behavior during coupon disputes, including a 2-hour standoff over expired manufacturer coupons and a physical altercation with a cashier who questioned her coupon authenticity. She carried a 3-ring binder containing 847 coupons for today's trip, organized by product category and expiration date, expecting to pay less than $50 for over $2,000 worth of merchandise. Her husband had threatened divorce twice over her coupon obsession, particularly after she converted their guest bedroom into a storage facility for her inventory. Linda's blog followers worshipped her ability to game the system, but store employees across Jacksonville had begun sharing her photo in break rooms, warning each other about the woman who turned simple transactions into hours-long ordeals. Her shopping strategy involved purchasing items in bulk when coupons offered the best deals, then stockpiling products in her garage until she could use them or resell them online. Linda's neighbors had complained about delivery trucks constantly arriving at her house, and her homeowners association had cited her for operating a business from her residence. The checkout process began at 4:30 p.m. and immediately devolved into chaos as Linda presented coupon after coupon while arguing about store policies with increasingly frustrated cashiers. 3 managers were called to resolve disputes over expired coupons, fraudulent manufacturer offers, and quantity limits that Linda insisted didn't apply to her. The line behind her grew to over 20 customers as her transaction consumed 2 full hours. Linda's voice grew shriller with each rejected coupon, her face turning crimson as she quoted corporate policy numbers and threatened legal action against individual employees. When the store manager informed Linda that 247 of her coupons were expired or fraudulent, she exploded into a rage that could be heard throughout the front of the store. She demanded to speak with the district manager and leaned aggressively over the customer service counter, shouting about corporate policies and threatening to sue the store for discrimination. Her 3-ring binder fell open, spilling hundreds of carefully organized coupons across the floor. As she stepped onto a small platform behind the counter to get a better view, Linda lost her footing on the wet surface, slipped on promotional flyers scattered across the platform, and fell backward, striking her head on the concrete floor with a sickening crack that silenced the entire checkout area. Her skull fractured on impact, causing massive brain hemorrhaging as her carefully organized coupons scattered across the floor like confetti. She lost consciousness immediately, her body convulsing as customers screamed and employees called 911. Emergency responders found Linda surrounded by hundreds of coupons, many of which investigators later determined were sophisticated counterfeits. She died at Memorial Hospital from her head injuries, with police discovering over $50,000 worth of fraudulent coupons in her possession. Walmart implemented new policies, limiting coupon quantities and requiring identification for large coupon transactions, while Linda's death became a case study in retail fraud training programs. It was September 12, 2015, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Sunset Ridge, an exclusive gated community in Scottsdale, Arizona. The 4,200-square-foot clubhouse buzzed with tension as nearly 80 residents filed into the main conference room, their voices creating an anxious murmur that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. The smell of fresh coffee from the hospitality station mixed with the faint scent of desert sage that drifted through the open windows. Patricia Whitfield adjusted her reading glasses one final time as she surveyed the crowd from behind the mahogany podium, her perfectly styled blonde hair not moving despite the gentle breeze from the air conditioning. At 52, the tyrannical HOA president had spent 6 years transforming the once peaceful community into her personal kingdom of rules and regulations. Her day job as a high-end real estate agent provided the income to support her obsessive lifestyle, but controlling her neighbors had become her true calling. Patricia carried a measuring tape and digital camera everywhere, documenting violations with the precision of a crime scene investigator. Her daily patrol routes covered every inch of the community's 240 acres, and she maintained detailed files on each of the 156 households. Residents had learned to peek through their curtains before stepping outside, knowing that Patricia might be lurking nearby with her citation book. Her aggressive enforcement had pushed several families into costly disputes over fines and legal fees. The Hendersons eventually sold their home after repeated citations over minor property issues escalated into thousands of dollars in penalties. Another family left after a prolonged conflict over landscaping rules, leaving neighbors wary of Patricia's zero-tolerance approach. Patricia took immense pride in her zero-tolerance policy and frequently boasted to other HOA presidents about maintaining the highest property values in Maricopa County. She had called tonight's special meeting to discuss her latest crusade: new restrictions that would ban all outdoor holiday decorations and limit pet ownership to one small dog per household. The meeting began with Patricia's characteristic intensity as she clicked through her PowerPoint presentation, each slide detailing new violations she had discovered and the corresponding fines she planned to implement. Her voice grew more shrill as residents began questioning her authority, their frustration evident after years of living under her oppressive rule. Patricia raised her voice as she pointed to photos of Halloween displays, insisting they lowered property values. She then turned to pet owners, blaming large dogs for the constant noise. To drive her point home, she stepped onto a chair at the front of the room. The frame shifted unsteadily beneath her weight as she continued addressing the crowd. Without warning, one of the chair's legs gave way. Patricia fell backward, her head striking the stone fireplace hearth with a sharp crack that silenced the room. The impact fractured her neck instantly, and she collapsed to the floor without movement. Blood began pooling around Patricia's head as shocked residents fumbled for their phones to call 911. She lay motionless, still clutching her violation citation book, her final words having been threats about implementing $100 daily fines for Christmas decorations. The paramedics arrived within 12 minutes, but Patricia Whitfield was pronounced dead at the scene. The HOA dissolved within 6 months, as residents voted overwhelmingly to eliminate the oppressive rules Patricia had implemented. Property values actually increased once the community became known for its welcoming atmosphere rather than strict regulations. The clubhouse fireplace was removed and replaced with a memorial garden promoting community harmony, though few mourned Patricia's passing. It was September 12, 2014, when Margaret Thompson's dedication to neighborhood standards would lead to a tragic encounter in Charlotte, North Carolina. Margaret Thompson, 55, served as an active member of her neighborhood association in Oakwood residential area. She embodied the quintessential neighborhood enforcer, the type who measured grass heights with rulers, kept detailed logs of minor infractions, and believed her interpretation of community standards was absolute law. Margaret possessed an unwavering sense of superiority, treating every homeowner like a potential violator who needed constant supervision. She took immense pride in maintaining community standards and spent her days ensuring every resident followed the established guidelines. That afternoon, Margaret had confronted 3 different neighbors about various violations she discovered during her rounds. Her first stop involved a family whose children had created chalk art on their own driveway. Margaret's controlling nature emerged as she demanded they remove the colorful drawings immediately, citing community standards. The Johnson family became her next target when Margaret noticed their garbage cans remained visible from the street 30 minutes past the designated pickup time. Displaying classic entitled behavior, she threatened them with a $200 fine for this violation. Mrs. Garcia's rose garden caught Margaret's attention next. The roses had grown 2 inches over the property line, and Margaret's condescending attitude was on full display as she loudly berated the woman, insisting the overgrowth was destroying neighborhood property values. When a neighbor suggested Margaret was being unreasonable, her defensive superiority complex kicked in as she declared herself the only person who truly cared about maintaining standards and threatened to report them to city authorities. At 7:15 p.m., Margaret began her usual evening route to check properties and ensure compliance with neighborhood guidelines. She carried her phone and notebook to document any issues she observed during her walk. The weather was clear but windy, with gusts reaching up to 25 miles per hour throughout the day. A local utility company was performing routine power line maintenance in the area, with crews working on elevated lines despite the challenging wind conditions. Margaret stopped beneath a utility pole to photograph what she believed was an improperly maintained yard. 30 feet above her, a utility worker was securing a power line that had been loosened by the persistent wind. A sudden gust of wind caused the worker to lose control of a heavy metal cable clamp weighing 8 pounds. The clamp fell from the pole just as Margaret looked up after hearing the worker's warning shout. The metal clamp struck Margaret directly on the head, causing severe head trauma. She immediately collapsed and lost consciousness within seconds of impact. Other residents and the utility crew immediately called 911 and attempted first aid while waiting for emergency responders. Margaret was quickly transported to the hospital, where surgeons performed emergency surgery to address her traumatic brain injury. Despite the medical team's efforts, Margaret died 3 hours later from the severe head trauma she sustained in the accident. The utility company responded to the tragedy by implementing stricter safety protocols for work performed during windy conditions. They also improved their equipment securing procedures to prevent similar accidents. The neighborhood association established a memorial garden in Margaret's honor at the local community center, recognizing her dedication to the community despite the circumstances of her death. New safety regulations were adopted requiring ground-level safety zones during all overhead utility work, ensuring better protection for pedestrians and residents in the area. Margaret Thompson's final day of neighborhood enforcement ended in an unexpected tragedy, her relentless pursuit of violations, ultimately placing her in the path of falling danger. It was August 3, 2018, when Jillian Frost's corporate entitlement would send her plummeting to her death in a Denver parking garage. Jillian, a 38-year-old HR director standing 5 feet 4 inches tall, had spent her career wielding power over employees like a weapon. She drove a pristine white BMW SUV that she used to intimidate anyone she deemed beneath her social status, always carrying business cards listing her corporate title to establish dominance over service workers. That Tuesday morning had already been a disaster for Jillian. After being denied a promotion she felt entitled to, she embarked on a revenge shopping spree to soothe her wounded ego. She had already screamed at a gas station attendant over pump speed, demanded a Subway manager fire an employee over sandwich assembly, and posted Instagram stories mocking what she called incompetent minimum wage workers. At the Target parking garage, Jillian's entitled rage reached a boiling point. She spent 20 minutes aggressively honking at families and elderly shoppers while filming them through her windshield. Her social media followers ate up her content titled "Teaching Parking Lot Etiquette to Peasants," encouraging her increasingly toxic behavior. When Jillian spotted the Martinez family loading groceries, she immediately pulled behind them and began laying on her horn. The family included 78-year-old grandmother Maria Martinez, who moved slowly with her walker due to arthritis. This fueled Jillian's impatience as she filmed while screaming about important people having jobs to get to. Unable to contain her corporate Karen rage, Jillian exploded from her vehicle like a woman possessed. She began her signature intimidation routine, stepping backward onto the concrete safety barrier to gain height advantage while filming and threatening to have the entire family arrested for obstruction. The 42-inch concrete barrier had been weakened by recent construction work, though it appeared solid. As Jillian gestured wildly while maintaining her confrontational stance, the compromised structure couldn't support her aggressive movements. Her 135-pound frame, combined with violent gesturing, caused the barrier to give way completely. Jillian plummeted 35 feet headfirst onto the asphalt below, her designer heels flying off during the fall. The impact was devastating. Her skull fractured in multiple places while her spine severed at the C2 vertebrae. Brain matter scattered across the pavement as her body went into immediate cardiac arrest. The Martinez family watched in horror as the woman terrorizing them just seconds before lay motionless in a growing pool of blood. Maria Martinez, despite being the target of Jillian's final tirade, called 911 with shaking hands. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, but Jillian was gone. Her phone, still clutched in her death grip, contained the final video of her entitled behavior causing her demise, showing her stepping onto the barrier while screaming threats before capturing her fatal fall. The parking garage was immediately closed for inspection, revealing multiple safety violations. Target faced a $2.3 million OSHA fine, though reduced when investigators determined Jillian's reckless behavior contributed significantly to the barrier failure. Online reactions were overwhelmingly unsympathetic. Comments flooded social media with phrases like, "She literally died mad about a parking space," and "Corporate Karen meets concrete reality." Her employer quietly restructured their HR department. After her history of workplace bullying emerged during the investigation, the Martinez family, traumatized by witnessing the death, received counseling and a settlement. Grandmother Maria developed severe anxiety about public spaces, forever haunted by being someone's final victim before their demise. Jillian Frost's death became a cautionary tale, proving that gravity doesn't care about your corporate title or entitled attitude. It was January 20th, 2018, and the spacious community center in Scottsdale, Arizona, buzzed with the energy of health-conscious residents attending the monthly wellness fair. The 5,000-square-foot facility had been transformed into a marketplace of alternative health vendors, with booths promoting everything from crystal healing to dietary supplements. The desert sun streamed through large windows as nearly 200 attendees browsed displays of natural health products. Crystal Williams arranged her elaborate essential oil display with the precision of a pharmaceutical chemist, each small bottle labeled with bold claims about its healing properties. At 41, the multi-level marketing distributor had built her entire identity around promoting essential oils as miracle cures for every conceivable health problem. Her transformation from struggling single mother to zealous wellness evangelist had occurred over the past 3 years as she climbed the ranks of her health product network. Crystal's aggressive sales tactics had destroyed most of her personal relationships, as friends and family grew tired of her constant pitches and dangerous medical advice. She had convinced several people to stop taking prescribed medications in favor of her oil treatments, including a diabetic neighbor who had been hospitalized after discontinuing insulin based on Crystal's claims that cinnamon oil could cure diabetes. The wellness fair represented Crystal's biggest opportunity to recruit new customers. She had prepared an elaborate demonstration designed to prove the safety of her products, planning to apply undiluted oils directly to her skin while making outrageous claims about their healing properties. Crystal's presentation quickly drew a crowd as she demonstrated increasingly reckless uses of her products, claiming they were completely safe. She opened several bottles of pure eucalyptus and tea tree oil she had purchased from an unregulated online supplier that advertised extra concentrated formulations. Crystal announced that she would prove the oil's safety by applying them directly to her skin, explaining that their higher potency made them more effective than standard aromatherapy products. She poured the undiluted eucalyptus oil across her forearms and rubbed it into her skin. Within minutes, her arms turned red and began to blister as the concentrated oils caused chemical burns. The strong vapors filled the air, and several people nearby began coughing from the overwhelming fumes. Soon after, the high concentration and chemical impurities in the untested oils triggered a severe allergic reaction that quickly progressed to anaphylaxis. Her airway began to close, and her blood pressure dropped as she stumbled behind the booth and collapsed while bystanders called for help. Paramedics stationed at the wellness fair arrived within minutes and began resuscitation efforts, but Crystal Williams was pronounced dead at 2:47 p.m. from anaphylactic shock, brought on by exposure to undiluted essential oils from an unregulated source. The wellness fair was shut down immediately, and the incident prompted renewed scrutiny of unregulated essential oil sales and false health claims. It was July 14, 2015, and the scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the asphalt parking lot of the Target shopping center in Plano. The temperature had already climbed to 98 degrees by 2 p.m., creating shimmering heat waves that danced across the crowded lot filled with shoppers seeking air-conditioned relief. The smell of hot concrete mixed with exhaust fumes from idling cars as families hurried between their vehicles and the store's automatic doors. Patricia Williams adjusted her oversized sunglasses as she surveyed the parking lot like a general inspecting troops. At 42, the real estate agent had earned a reputation throughout her neighborhood as the unofficial parking enforcement officer, documenting violations with the dedication of a professional investigator. Her silver Honda Civic contained a glove compartment stuffed with printed parking regulations, a measuring tape, and a notebook filled with license plate numbers of repeat offenders. Patricia had been involved in over 30 documented disputes with neighbors, store employees, and complete strangers over the past year alone. Her homeowners association had received so many complaints about her confrontational behavior that they'd issued her a formal warning about harassment. But Patricia saw herself as a crusader for order in a chaotic world, someone willing to do what others were too cowardly to attempt. The motorcycle caught her attention immediately. A gleaming black Harley-Davidson parked diagonally across two prime spaces near the store entrance. Patricia's blood pressure spiked as she calculated the injustice. One selfish person taking up two spots during peak shopping hours while families circled the lot searching for parking. She pulled out her phone and began recording, her voice dripping with righteous indignation as she documented what she planned to be her most viral confrontation yet. Patricia positioned herself directly behind the 800-pound motorcycle, her phone camera capturing every detail as she delivered a scathing monologue about parking etiquette and social responsibility. The absent owner would return to find their bike properly positioned, she declared, because someone needed to teach these inconsiderate people a lesson about community standards. Despite having zero experience with motorcycles, Patricia grabbed the handlebars and attempted to push the massive machine into a single parking space. The Harley's weight immediately overwhelmed her 130-pound frame, and she lost her balance as the bike tilted beyond her control. The motorcycle crashed down on top of her with devastating force, its full weight crushing her chest and pinning her arms beneath the hot metal. Patricia struggled desperately under the crushing weight, her phone still recording as she gasped for air that wouldn't come. The motorcycle's engine guard pressed against her ribcage, preventing her lungs from expanding while the scorching exhaust pipe burned through her blouse. Her legs kicked frantically against the asphalt as she fought to free herself, but the bike's position made escape impossible. A few minutes later, a Target employee discovered Patricia's body still trapped beneath the motorcycle, her phone's battery finally dead after recording her entire ordeal. Security footage revealed her confident approach and fatal miscalculation, while her final video showed the moment her parking lot vigilantism turned deadly. The motorcycle's owner returned to find police tape and paramedics, completely unaware that his parking choice had inadvertently caused a death. Patricia's story became a viral cautionary tale about the dangers of taking justice into your own hands. It was August 19, 2018, and the cool mountain air carried the sounds of urban life through the courtyard of Pine Ridge Apartments in Denver, Colorado. The three-story complex housed nearly 200 residents in 80 units, their evening routines creating the normal symphony of apartment living. The scent of dinner preparations drifted from open windows, mixing with the fresh smell of recently watered landscaping. Margaret Daniels pressed her ear against the wall, separating her unit from her neighbors, her decibel meter registering the faint sound of a television at normal volume. At 46, the government clerk had developed an obsession with noise complaints, filing numerous formal grievances during her 2 years of residency. Her persistent complaints had resulted in several families moving out of the complex. Margaret documented sounds throughout the day, maintaining logs with timestamps and decibel readings. She would pound on walls and ceilings at various hours, demanding quiet from neighbors who were conducting normal daily activities. Her apartment contained multiple sound monitoring devices and stacks of complaint documentation. The upstairs neighbors, the Chen family, had endured months of Margaret's complaints about normal activities like walking across their floor and watching television at reasonable volumes. Tonight, their 8-year-old daughter was practicing piano at 7 p.m., well within the building's designated quiet hours that didn't begin until 10 p.m. Margaret became increasingly agitated as the piano music drifted through the ceiling. She grabbed her decibel meter and complaint forms, going upstairs to confront the family about what she considered excessive noise. Her pounding on their door echoed through the hallway, but the Chens had learned to ignore her complaints. Frustrated by their refusal to answer, Margaret retrieved a maintenance ladder from the storage closet and positioned it against the building's exterior wall. She planned to climb onto the Chen's second-floor balcony to continue her confrontation, bypassing their locked door. The wooden balcony railing, installed when the complex was built in 1987, had been weakened by 31 years of Colorado weather extremes. Freeze-thaw cycles had loosened the bolts, and recent heavy rains had rotted the support posts, though the damage wasn't visible from ground level. Margaret climbed the ladder with her complaint notebook tucked under her arm and her decibel meter hanging from her belt. At 5 feet 6 inches and 160 pounds, she represented a significant load for the compromised railing system. Other residents watched from their windows as she reached the balcony level, some recording the scene on their phones. Margaret pounded on the sliding glass door while the Chen family remained inside. She leaned her full weight against the railing to get closer to the window, applying pressure to the weakest section of the deteriorated structure. The railing gave way with a sharp crack that echoed through the courtyard. Margaret fell 3 stories onto the concrete courtyard below, her body striking the pavement with an impact that could be heard throughout the complex. The fall created a loud disturbance that startled neighbors who had been sleeping peacefully despite her constant complaints about normal living sounds. She died instantly from multiple fractures and massive internal injuries, her decibel meter shattered beside her body. The apartment complex faced liability issues for the unsafe balcony railing that hadn't been properly maintained or inspected. A structural engineer's report revealed that multiple balconies throughout the property had similar deterioration, leading to a renovation project. Neighbors provided evidence of Margaret's harassment campaign, documenting her behavior toward families conducting normal daily activities. The Chen family moved out within a month following the incident. New building management implemented policies requiring mediation before eviction proceedings for noise complaints. They installed soundproofing in units with shared walls and established quiet hours that balanced residents' rights to both peace and normal living activities. The complex installed safety barriers around all balconies and implemented regular structural inspections. Margaret's apartment was converted into a community room where residents could resolve disputes through mediation. It was March 15, 2012, and Linda Morrison was doing what she did best, making retail workers miserable. The 52-year-old department store manager had just spent 45 minutes absolutely tearing into a teenage cashier over a $12 return at Westfield Shopping Center in Riverside, California. Linda's behavior that evening was textbook entitlement. She had berated the young employee relentlessly, demanding to speak with corporate headquarters and threatening to ruin the store's reputation online over a trivial policy dispute. Her voice carried throughout the store as she loudly proclaimed to other waiting customers that customer service was dead and the staff was completely incompetent. She wasn't finished there. Linda demanded the store manager provide written documentation of what she called policy violations and insisted on corporate contact information so she could file complaints with the Better Business Bureau. Her decade-plus experience as a retail manager had taught her exactly which buttons to push to make minimum wage workers squirm. After her exhausting 10-hour workday, this confrontation was just another Tuesday for Linda, who was known for her impossibly high standards and zero tolerance for anything less than perfection from service workers. As Linda rushed through the mall at 6:45 p.m., she was loaded down with multiple shopping bags and her oversized purse, wearing brand new leather-soled shoes she'd purchased that morning. She was already running late to meet her husband for dinner, adding to her already elevated stress levels. The ascending escalator she approached had been making concerning grinding noises for 2 weeks. Maintenance requests sat unaddressed due to budget constraints, a detail that would prove crucial later. Distracted by a text from her husband about dinner plans, Linda stepped onto the escalator without paying attention. Her smooth leather soles found no grip on the recently cleaned, still damp metal steps. Near the top, physics took over. Her feet slipped completely on the wet surface, and as she grabbed desperately for the handrail, her heavy bags shifted her center of gravity backward. The momentum became unstoppable. Linda's head struck the sharp metal edge of an escalator step with devastating force, causing severe trauma that knocked her unconscious instantly. Her loose scarf became tangled in the escalator mechanism as panicked shoppers rushed to help. The emergency stop activated within 30 seconds, but Linda had already sustained fatal head trauma from the initial impact. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes, but she was pronounced dead at the scene due to a traumatic brain injury. The mall immediately shut down all escalators for safety inspections and installed additional warning signs. Investigation revealed the escalator met safety standards, but recommended more frequent maintenance schedules. The incident serves as a stark reminder that life can change in an instant, regardless of how much control we think we have over our circumstances. It was July 4th, 2019, when Natalia Brooks' obsession with neighborhood control would send her drowning to the bottom of a Miami pool during what should have been a patriotic celebration. Natalia, a 39-year-old homeowners association president, standing 5 feet 3 inches tall, had transformed her HOA position into a personal dictatorship. She drove a white golf cart equipped with cameras and citation books, patrolling the neighborhood like a military commander, enforcing martial law on suburban families. Natalia's Facebook group, Violation Reporting, had over 200 members who encouraged her surveillance tactics. She had installed security cameras to monitor neighbors and was notorious for filming residents during private moments, posting footage online with rants about property values. That Independence Day morning had been productive for Natalia's authoritarian agenda. She had issued citations for excessive patriotic decorations, filmed families for noise violations involving children playing, and posted Facebook rants about inconsiderate neighbors destroying property values. After consuming wine while patrolling, Natalia spotted cars at the Johnson family's pool party. Her alcohol-fueled authority kicked into overdrive as she began filming while screaming about unauthorized gatherings and parking violations. Natalia's signature tactic involved walking backward while maintaining aggressive eye contact during confrontations, a psychological dominance play perfected through years of neighborhood harassment. This move had intimidated dozens of residents into submission. Arriving at the pool party in business attire with her clipboard, Natalia crashed through the gate, screaming about illegal gatherings while filming terrified children and families trying to enjoy their holiday. Unable to contain her HOA authority complex, Natalia began confronting guests about parking. She walked backward along the pool's edge to maintain her intimidating stare while screaming about running the neighborhood and demanding respect. To establish maximum dominance, Natalia stepped onto the decorative stone coping surrounding the pool. The stones had become slippery from splashing water, but Natalia was too focused on her power performance to notice the dangerous surface. As Natalia gestured wildly with her clipboard while walking backward, her business heels lost traction on the wet stone. Her 130-pound frame tumbled backward into the 8-foot deep end, still wearing her heavy business suit and leather shoes. The waterlogged clothing immediately dragged Natalia downward as she thrashed frantically. Her clipboard floated beside her as she struggled desperately, unable to swim and weighed down by her authority costume that became a death trap. Party guests initially thought Natalia was staging another dramatic confrontation. By the time they realized the situation was genuine, she had been underwater for over 3 minutes. Natalia suffered drowning-induced cardiac arrest as pool water filled her lungs. Her final moments were spent clawing at the water while her clipboard sank beside her, the symbol of her tyranny becoming waterlogged evidence. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes, but Natalia was dead at the pool bottom. Her body was recovered, still clutching HOA violation forms, the papers she used to terrorize neighbors now dissolved into illegible pulp. The community's reaction was notably unsympathetic, with neighbors privately expressing relief. The Johnson family faced no consequences as the party was within the ordinances and Natalia had been trespassing. Natalia's HOA position was dissolved, and the neighborhood association was restructured to prevent future harassment. Her Facebook group was deactivated after members began celebrating her death. The incident led to statewide HOA reforms limiting president's authority. Natalia Brooks' death became a cautionary tale about how power-hungry behavior can literally drag you under. It was November 8th, 2020, and the fluorescent lights of a grocery store in Tulsa, Oklahoma, hummed overhead as Tuesday morning shoppers navigated the aisles with their carts and shopping lists. The 45,000-square-foot store had implemented new health protocols during flu season, requiring masks and providing hand sanitizer stations throughout the facility. Signs posted at every entrance reminded customers of the temporary safety measures designed to protect the community's health. Diane Fletcher sat in her car in the parking lot, applying lipstick and checking her phone one final time before entering the store without the required face covering. At 48, the insurance agent had made defying public health guidelines her personal crusade, viewing every safety measure as government overreach that threatened her constitutional freedoms. Her social media accounts were filled with videos of her confronting store employees and deliberately violating health protocols while filming herself for her 3,000 followers. Diane's aggressive behavior had escalated over the past 6 months, resulting in bans from 4 different grocery stores and 2 pharmacies throughout Tulsa. She had organized freedom rallies in public spaces where participants would intentionally violate health measures, often targeting businesses that enforced safety guidelines. Her insurance clients had begun dropping her after videos of her confrontational behavior went viral, but Diane viewed their rejection as proof that she was fighting the right battle. Her morning routine now included planning which businesses to target for her daily protests, often choosing locations where she knew her disruptive behavior would attract the most attention. Diane carried a small camera everywhere, hoping to capture footage of what she called tyrannical enforcement of health measures that she could use to build her online following. The store manager had been warned about Diane's previous visits and had instructed employees to call security immediately if she appeared. Her reputation for aggressive confrontations and deliberate attempts to expose other customers to illness had made her a significant liability for any business she entered. Diane burst through the automatic doors with characteristic defiance, immediately approaching the customer service desk, where the manager stood reviewing the morning's sales reports. She announced loudly that she was there to shop without wearing what she called a communist face diaper, pulling out her phone to begin recording the interaction. When the manager politely asked her to leave, Diane began her usual routine of coughing deliberately on nearby customers while filming their reactions. She moved through the produce section, touching fruits and vegetables while coughing on them, her behavior becoming increasingly erratic as other shoppers backed away in disgust and fear. Security guards approached cautiously, having been trained to de-escalate situations involving disruptive customers. But Diane's behavior escalated rapidly as she began throwing canned goods at employees, screaming about her constitutional rights while continuing to film herself. Her face was flushed with rage as she grabbed items from shelves and hurled them at anyone who tried to approach her. In her fury, Diane knocked over a large end-cap display of glass pasta sauce jars, sending dozens of containers crashing to the floor. As she stepped backward to avoid the falling merchandise, a large jar struck her upper thigh and shattered. A sharp glass shard drove upward into the inner portion of her upper thigh, severing her femoral artery. Blood began spurting from the wound with each heartbeat as Diane collapsed among the broken glass and scattered canned goods. Her phone continued recording on the floor beside her, while employees rushed to apply pressure to the wound. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but Diane Fletcher was pronounced dead shortly afterward from massive blood loss caused by a femoral artery injury. In the aftermath, the store received several complaints from customers who said they had been deliberately coughed on during the incident, and security footage of her final confrontation spread rapidly online. It was March 22, 2016, and the dinner rush at Olive Garden in Fresno, California, was in full swing as servers weaved between tables carrying steaming plates of pasta and breadsticks. The restaurant's warm lighting created a cozy atmosphere, while the sounds of clinking silverware and conversation filled the 200-seat dining room. The kitchen operated at peak efficiency, with line cooks coordinating their movements in the choreographed dance of professional food service. Susan Martinez sat at table 47, her notebook open and pen poised as she documented every perceived violation of health codes and service standards. At 38, the insurance claims adjuster had transformed dining out into a full-time investigation, carrying sanitizing wipes, a digital thermometer, and a magnifying glass to examine food preparation from her table. Her purse contained printed copies of health department regulations and business cards identifying her as a concerned citizen advocate. Susan had been banned from 4 restaurants in the past 6 months for disruptive behavior, including climbing over a counter at Applebee's to inspect their ice machine and demanding to see food storage temperatures at Denny's. She maintained a detailed spreadsheet of violations and had filed 17 complaints with the health department, though none had resulted in citations. Tonight's visit to Olive Garden was part of her systematic campaign to clean up Fresno's restaurant industry. When Susan observed a server briefly touch the rim of a plate while delivering salad, she immediately demanded to speak with the manager. Her voice carried across the dining room as she accused the staff of flagrant health code violations and threatened to shut down the restaurant with a single phone call. The manager, trained in de-escalation techniques, politely explained their sanitation procedures while offering to comp her meal. Susan's demands escalated as she insisted on conducting her own kitchen inspection, claiming she had authority as a tax-paying citizen to ensure public safety. When the manager refused her entry to the restricted kitchen area, Susan announced she would find her own way in to gather evidence of the violations she was certain existed. During a shift change, Susan slipped through the employee entrance and into the bustling kitchen, her phone camera ready to document what she expected to be shocking health violations. She climbed onto a stainless steel prep counter to photograph what she believed were code violations in the ceiling ventilation system. As she stretched for a better camera angle, her shoes slid on the freshly sanitized surface, and she lost her footing, tumbling off the counter. She twisted in midair and landed face first in an industrial deep fryer that had been left open during a routine oil filter change. Scalding 350-degree oil covered her upper body as she screamed in agony, the sound echoing through the kitchen while staff rushed to pull her out. The burns covered more than 60% of her body, and the superheated vapors severely damaged her airways. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, but Susan's injuries were beyond treatment. She died at Community Regional Medical Center 3 hours later, her phone containing dozens of photos of normal kitchen operations that she had misinterpreted as violations. The restaurant was temporarily closed during the investigation, which concluded that Susan had illegally entered a restricted area and caused her own death through reckless behavior. It was December 23, 2017, and the holiday shopping frenzy filled the air at Pioneer Place Mall in Portland, Oregon. The Nordstrom department store buzzed with last-minute shoppers as nearly 200 customers navigated the crowded aisles, their voices creating a symphony of holiday stress and excitement. The scent of expensive perfume from the cosmetics counter mixed with the aroma of cinnamon from the nearby food court. Linda Blackwood wheeled her shopping cart toward the customer service counter with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. At 44, the mortgage broker had developed a pattern of fraudulent returns over the past several years, purchasing items, using them extensively, then returning them with fabricated complaints and demands for compensation. Linda had become a known problem customer at multiple retailers throughout the Pacific Northwest, with store employees learning to recognize her frequent attempts to return obviously used merchandise. She had been banned from several stores but continued her schemes by shopping at different locations and using various excuses for her returns. Her cart contained clearly used items, a designer handbag with visible wear marks, shoes that had obviously been worn outdoors, and clothing with deodorant stains and missing tags. Linda had prepared an elaborate story about receiving defective merchandise as gifts, complete with fake receipts and manufactured outrage. The customer service manager, Jennifer Walsh, recognized Linda immediately from previous encounters and reports from other stores. The store had been documenting her fraudulent activities for months, building a case with security footage and coordination with other retailers. Tonight would mark the end of Linda's return scam operation. When Jennifer politely refused the return of the clearly damaged designer handbag, Linda's carefully constructed facade crumbled instantly. Her face contorted with rage as she began shouting threats and accusations, her voice carrying across the entire store. Other customers backed away as Linda's tantrum escalated into violence. She shouted accusations across the store and threatened legal action against the company. In her fury, she began grabbing merchandise from nearby displays and hurling it at the customer service counter. Linda seized a heavy crystal vase from a holiday display, raising it above her head with both hands. Linda hurled the vase toward Jennifer's head, but the manager ducked behind the counter just in time. The heavy crystal struck the wall and shattered on impact. A large fragment deflected off the surface and hit Linda on the side of the neck, severing a major artery. She pressed her hand to the wound and collapsed among the merchandise as blood pooled across the floor. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but she was pronounced dead at the scene while shocked shoppers looked on. Security footage revealed the full extent of Linda's return fraud scheme, leading to a posthumous investigation that uncovered tens of thousands of dollars in fraudulent returns. Multiple retailers provided evidence of her activities, and her family discovered significant credit card debt that highlighted the scope of her fraudulent operations. It was July 4, 2017, when a dedication to community service turned deadly for 46-year-old Jennifer Walsh at Riverside Park in Portland, Oregon, a woman whose relentless pursuit of perfection would ultimately cost her everything. Jennifer Walsh was a dedicated community volunteer who helped organize the annual 4th of July celebration at Riverside Park. Her responsibility was coordinating vendor setup and ensuring all safety protocols were followed during the event. But Jennifer's approach had become increasingly confrontational and rigid. She had spent 2 hours berating food vendors about their setup locations, insisting they move their booths despite having approved permits for their current spots. Jennifer demanded that the live music be turned down during sound check, threatening to call police about noise violations, even though the event had proper permits. Her demands escalated as she confronted families setting up picnic areas, claiming they were violating official event protocols and demanding they relocate to less desirable spots. When other volunteers suggested she was being too rigid, Jennifer declared she was the only one who takes event safety seriously and threatened to report violations to the city. The park was hosting its largest Independence Day celebration in years, with multiple food vendors, live music, and fireworks planned. Jennifer was checking on the setup of a temporary stage structure that had been erected by a local rental company. High winds earlier in the day had caused some concern about the stability of temporary structures throughout the park. The weather conditions made Jennifer even more vigilant about potential safety issues as she conducted her inspections. At 4:30 p.m., Jennifer was inspecting the stage area when she noticed some loose securing cables that immediately raised her concerns. Determined to get a better look at the rigging system, she climbed onto the stage platform to examine the overhead mounting points more closely. As she studied the connections, a sudden gust of wind struck the temporary structure with unexpected force. One of the overhead lighting trusses, weighing 150 pounds, shifted under the wind pressure and broke free from its mounting system. The heavy truss fell approximately 15 feet through the air. Jennifer tried to move out of the way, but there wasn't enough time or space to escape the falling equipment. The massive truss struck Jennifer with devastating force, causing severe chest and head injuries that left her trapped under the twisted metal and lighting equipment. The woman who had spent her day ensuring everyone else followed safety protocols had become the victim of a structural failure. Other volunteers and emergency responders worked frantically to free Jennifer from under the heavy equipment. Within 8 minutes, they had managed to lift the truss and extract her from the wreckage. Jennifer was immediately airlifted to the trauma center, where surgeons fought to save her life. Despite their efforts, she died from her injuries during emergency surgery. The Independence Day celebration was canceled immediately following the accident. All temporary structures were immediately inspected as officials worked to determine if other equipment posed similar risks. The tragedy prompted comprehensive changes in how Portland handled community events. New safety regulations were implemented requiring certified engineers to approve all temporary stage installations before any event could proceed. The days of relying solely on volunteer oversight for complex structural safety were over. The community established an annual safety award in Jennifer's name for outstanding volunteer service, ensuring her dedication would be remembered while emphasizing the importance of professional safety standards. Jennifer Walsh's death serves as a sobering reminder that good intentions and dedication must be balanced with proper expertise, and that sometimes the very commitment that drives us to serve our communities can put us in unexpected danger. It was March 15, 2017, when Vanessa Clay's relentless need to dominate every interaction would finally catch up with her in the most horrific way imaginable. Vanessa, a 42-year-old pharmaceutical sales manager from Columbus, Ohio, had built her entire identity around intimidating service workers and demanding special treatment wherever she went. Standing 5 feet 6 inches tall with perfectly styled blonde hair, she carried herself with an air of superiority that made everyone around her uncomfortable. Her weapon of choice was her expensive Hermes scarf, which she wore like a badge of honor while berating minimum wage employees. That Tuesday afternoon, Vanessa had already terrorized 3 different establishments. She made a teenage Starbucks barista cry over Fomart, got a McDonald's employee written up for allegedly slow service, and screamed at a Target cashier for refusing her expired coupon. Each confrontation was live-streamed to her 5,000 social media followers who encouraged her toxic behavior. At Westfield Shopping Center, Vanessa arrived at the jewelry store demanding a $300 return without a receipt. When the clerk politely explained store policy, Vanessa exploded into her signature tirade, adjusting her designer scarf dramatically while filming the interaction. The young employee called security guard Marcus Williams, a 28-year-old father of 2 who had dealt with difficult customers before, but never anyone quite like Vanessa. As Vanessa descended the escalator, she spotted Marcus below and immediately began her assault. Leaning over the handrail while maintaining her live stream, she screamed about incompetent employees and threatened to have everyone fired. Her need to gesture dramatically while filming and carrying multiple shopping bags created a perfect storm of reckless behavior. The Hermes scarf that Vanessa used as her symbol of superiority began dancing in the air as she waved her arms aggressively. In her rage-fueled tunnel vision, she failed to notice the fabric drifting toward the escalator's side panel mechanism. The moving machinery caught the silk material and began pulling it tight around her neck. For 45 agonizing seconds, security cameras captured Vanessa clawing desperately at the scarf that was now strangling her. The same hands she had used moments before to point accusingly at employees were now fighting for her life. Other passengers screamed and frantically searched for the emergency stop button, but it was too late. The escalator's relentless mechanical force compressed Vanessa's cervical vertebrae while completely obstructing her airway. Her 140-pound frame went limp as the designer accessory she had worn to intimidate others became the instrument of her death. Emergency responders arrived 8 minutes later, but Vanessa Clay was already gone. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The woman who had spent years using her status symbols to terrorize service workers had been killed by the very scarf she wore to establish dominance. Her final live stream, still recording as paramedics worked, captured her last entitled demands before the fatal accident. Marcus Williams, the security guard she had been screaming at, required months of counseling to cope with watching someone die while cursing his name. The incident went viral, but instead of sympathy, millions of viewers mocked Vanessa's entitled behavior with comments like "Play Karen games, win Karen prizes." Vanessa's family attempted to sue them all, but security footage clearly showed her reckless behavior directly caused the accident. The case was dismissed, and Westfield implemented new safety protocols including loose clothing warnings and additional emergency stops on all escalators. The tragedy became a cautionary tale about how toxic entitlement can have deadly consequences, with Vanessa Clay's name becoming synonymous with the ultimate Karen karma. It was July 4th, 2013, and the oppressive Florida heat shimmered off the asphalt of West Shore Plaza's parking lot in Tampa. The shopping center buzzed with holiday activity, as nearly 500 cars filled the sprawling lot, their occupants seeking air-conditioned relief from the 95-degree temperature. The smell of hot asphalt mixed with exhaust fumes and the distant aroma of barbecue from a nearby restaurant. Deborah Morrison adjusted her homemade parking enforcement badge as she surveyed the parking lot with the authority of a self-appointed monitor. At 51, the bank manager had developed an obsession with parking violations at the mall, carrying printed notices and a digital camera to document what she considered improper parking. Her behavior had cost her friendships and strained her marriage, but she refused to abandon what she saw as her duty. Deborah kept records of license plates and would call police to report violations, even when no actual laws had been broken. She had confronted numerous shoppers over the past 2 years, turning minor parking disputes into major confrontations that often required security intervention. Mall management had repeatedly asked her to stop, but she insisted she was providing a public service. Her latest targets were a young family loading groceries into their SUV. The The Johnsons had parked legally within the designated lines, but Deborah believed they were too close to the cart return area, violating her personal interpretation of parking regulations. Deborah positioned herself directly behind their vehicle while taking photos of their license plate, shouting about parking violations and threatening to call police. The father, Mark Johnson, tried to ignore her while securing his children in their car seats, but Deborah's harassment continued to escalate. When Mark began backing out slowly, Deborah deliberately positioned herself behind the moving vehicle, refusing to move despite his warnings. She pounded on the rear window while continuing her complaints about parking violations, her face red with rage in the sweltering heat. The SUV's rear bumper struck Deborah as she moved closer to prevent their departure. The impact knocked her backward onto the concrete, and her head struck the curb. The sound echoed across the parking lot as witnesses called for help. But Deborah Morrison died from severe brain trauma. Security footage showed Deborah's aggressive behavior and deliberate positioning behind the moving vehicle. The driver was initially charged with vehicular manslaughter, but charges were dropped when witnesses testified about her actions. The mall hired professional parking attendants and installed additional security cameras following the incident. It was March 7, 2013, and the austere chambers of a city hall in Texas, filled with the usual mix of concerned citizens and local activists, attending the monthly city council meeting. The 200-seat chamber echoed with conversations about municipal budgets and zoning issues, as residents waited their turn to address the council during the public comment period. Fluorescent lights reflected off polished wood surfaces while city officials reviewed their agenda items. Janet Morrison clutched her homemade protest signs as she waited for her turn to speak, her obsession with water fluoridation having consumed her life for the past 2 years. At 52, the dental hygienist had ironically become the city's most vocal anti-fluoride activist, despite her professional background in oral health. Her transformation had begun after reading conspiracy theories online that convinced her fluoride was a government mind control agent, rather than a public health measure. Janet's monthly appearances at city council meetings had become increasingly disruptive as she exceeded speaking time limits and interrupted other speakers with rambling speeches about fluoride dangers. Her former employer had terminated her after she began advising patients against using fluoridated toothpaste, leading to increased tooth decay in several children whose parents followed her advice. During the public comment period, Janet approached the podium with her large wooden signs and began her usual tirade about fluoride being used for population control. When the council president reminded her of the 3-minute speaking limit, Janet became agitated and started waving her protest signs while continuing to speak. Security officers approached to escort her from the podium, but Janet became violent and began swinging her heavy wooden signs at anyone who tried to remove her. In her frenzied movements, she stumbled backward while wildly swinging one of her large protest signs, losing her balance as she fought against the security officers trying to restrain her. Janet fell backward with tremendous force, striking her head against the marble steps leading up to the council chamber's raised platform. The impact caused severe head trauma, and she never regained consciousness despite immediate medical attention from paramedics who arrived within minutes. Janet Morrison was pronounced dead at 7:23 p.m. while still clutching pamphlets about fluoride dangers, her conspiracy theories claiming her life in the very chamber where she had spent years promoting them. The city council meeting was immediately adjourned, and ironically, Janet's death led to increased public support for water fluoridation, as residents rejected the extreme conspiracy theories that had consumed her final years. It was June 12, 2015, and the vibrant Saturday morning atmosphere of a downtown farmers market in Portland filled the square with the sounds of live music, chattering vendors, and families enjoying the Pacific Northwest's finest local produce. The weekly market featured over 80 vendors selling everything from organic vegetables to artisanal cheeses, creating a 2-acre outdoor marketplace that attracted thousands of health-conscious shoppers each weekend. Beverly Chen adjusted her reusable hemp shopping bags as she surveyed the market stalls with the intensity of a military strategist planning an assault. At 45, the yoga studio owner had transformed her interest in healthy eating into an obsession with pure organic food. that she believed was the only safe nutrition available in a world she saw as deliberately poisoned by corporate agriculture. Her conversion to extreme organic-only eating had begun 3 years earlier, after reading conspiracy theories about pesticide use that convinced her that conventional farming was part of a plot to sicken the population. Beverly's weekly farmers market visits had become increasingly confrontational as she appointed herself the unofficial food purity police, lecturing other shoppers about their choices and harassing vendors about their farming practices. She carried a notebook filled with the names of farms she had researched online, cross-referencing each vendor's claims against her extensive database of approved organic producers. Her aggressive questioning had led to several heated arguments with farmers, who she accused of lying about their growing methods. The yoga studio Beverly owned had lost half its students over the past year, as her extreme dietary beliefs began influencing her teaching. She would interrupt classes to lecture students about the dangers of non-organic food, and had banned anyone from bringing conventional snacks into her facility. Her own health had deteriorated significantly due to her restrictive eating patterns, but she refused medical treatment, claiming that doctors were part of the conspiracy to promote unhealthy food. Beverly's family had staged an intervention 6 months earlier, concerned about her dramatic weight loss and increasingly paranoid behavior. She had cut contact with relatives who wouldn't adopt her extreme dietary restrictions, viewing their concern as evidence that they had been brainwashed by corporate food propaganda. That morning, Beverly discovered that one of her trusted vendors was selling both organic and conventionally grown produce from the same booth, a practice she viewed as contamination of pure food with poisonous chemicals. She began her confrontation quietly, questioning the farmer about his growing methods while other customers browsed his selection of summer vegetables. When the farmer explained that he grew both organic and conventional crops to serve different customer needs, Beverly's voice rose to a shout that could be heard throughout the market square. She screamed about people being poisoned, pointing at the conventionally grown tomatoes as if they were radioactive waste. Beverly began grabbing conventional vegetables from the display and throwing them at other customers, screaming warnings about pesticide contamination, while the farmer tried to calm her down. Market security approached as her behavior became increasingly erratic, but Beverly was beyond reasoning as her obsession with food purity reached a breaking point. In her rage, Beverly grabbed the vendor's metal canopy support pole, intending to use it as a weapon against what she saw as the forces of food contamination. The heavy aluminum pole was unwieldy in her malnourished hands, and as she swung it wildly, she lost her balance and slipped on the vegetables she had thrown across the ground. Beverly fell backward with tremendous force, still gripping the pole as the canopy frame tipped with her. Both struck the pavement together, and the metal bar hit her head on impact, causing a fatal skull fracture. She never regained consciousness among the scattered organic produce she had been defending, her body surrounded by the vegetables she believed were humanity's salvation. Beverly Chen was pronounced dead at the scene at 10:15 a.m. from massive head trauma. It was June 22, 2016, when Whitney Collins's obsession with authority and viral fame would crush her to death at a Phoenix McDonald's drive-thru. Whitney, a 35-year-old middle school vice principal standing 5 feet 5 inches tall, had built her identity around wielding power over teenagers and service workers. Her red Honda Civic was equipped with phone mounts for filming confrontations, and she carried laminated credentials to intimidate anyone who questioned her authority. Whitney's vice principal Karen TikTok account boasted 8,000 followers who consumed her daily content of berating fast food workers and retail employees. She had perfected using her educational position as a weapon, constantly reminding people that she dealt with lying teenagers and knew insubordination. That Tuesday morning had been productive for Whitney's content creation. She had suspended 3 students for attitude problems, filmed herself screaming at a parent who questioned her methods, and posted about teaching respect to the next generation and their enabling parents. Whitney was infamous at this burger joint's location, having previously gotten 2 teenage employees fired by filming them and demanding corporate action. Her signature move involved exiting her vehicle during drive-thru disputes to intimidate young workers while live streaming. When 17-year-old employee Jake Martinez informed Whitney that the ice cream machine was broken, she launched into her tirade about being a school administrator who dealt with lying teenagers daily. Her followers commented encouragement as she began her escalation routine. Unable to contain her need for dramatic content, Whitney exited her Honda Civic while leaving it in drive, live streaming as she approached the menu board. She began pounding on the structure while screaming about incompetence and threatening to shut down the establishment. To intimidate Jake and capture better footage, Whitney began violently shaking the 200-pound electronic menu board support pole. The structure had been loosened by Arizona windstorms, but Whitney was too focused on her performance to notice the dangerous swaying. The menu board couldn't withstand Whitney's assault and began toppling toward her as she continued filming. In her final moments, she was screaming blame at Jake when the metal structure struck her across the back with devastating force. Whitney was crushed between the falling menu board and her slowly rolling Honda Civic. Her spine snapped instantly while her ribcage collapsed under the weight. Internal organs ruptured as 200 pounds of metal compressed her 125-pound frame against the bumper. Her phone captured every horrific second as she was pinned and crushed. The footage showed her final accusatory stare at Jake, still trying to blame the teenager as her life ended. Jake Martinez quit immediately and required therapy for survivor's guilt, haunted by Whitney's final moments of blaming him. The school district investigated Whitney's conduct, revealing inappropriate interactions with students and parents documented on social media. Whitney Collins' death became the ultimate cautionary tale about Karen culture and deadly consequences of entitled behavior, proving viral fame isn't worth dying for. It was March 8, 2014, and the mild evening air carried the sounds of clinking glasses and animated conversation through the historic district of Charleston, South Carolina. Giuseppe's Italian restaurant hummed with activity as nearly 60 diners enjoyed their meals in the elegantly appointed dining room, the soft lighting from crystal chandeliers creating an intimate atmosphere. The aroma of garlic and fresh basil filled the air, mixing with the subtle scent of aged wine from the restaurant's extensive collection. Brenda Pemberton adjusted her designer reading glasses as she surveyed the menu with the calculating gaze of someone preparing for battle. At 47, the insurance claims adjuster had built a notorious reputation throughout Charleston's restaurant scene as a serial complainer who turned every dining experience into an opportunity for confrontation and compensation. Her pattern of exaggerated grievances and threats of lawsuits had made her a dreaded customer at establishments across the Southeast. Restaurant managers throughout Charleston knew Brenda by name and would often comp her meals preemptively to avoid the lengthy confrontations that could last for hours and disrupt their other customers. Her insurance background had taught her exactly which complaints would generate the fastest results and how to phrase her grievances to suggest potential liability issues that restaurant owners feared most. Brenda had developed a systematic approach to her restaurant complaints, always arriving with a mental list of potential issues she could exploit. She understood how to escalate minor service problems into major incidents that would result in free meals, cash settlements, or both. Local restaurant staff had learned to recognize her tactics, but many establishments still found it easier to appease her than to deal with the scenes she would create. Tonight's target was Giuseppe's, an upscale establishment she had been planning to visit for months. She arrived with her usual arsenal of potential complaints, having researched the restaurant's online reviews to identify service issues that other customers had mentioned. Her goal was ambitious: a full refund plus additional compensation for what she would claim was unacceptable treatment. Brenda began her usual routine immediately, loudly criticizing the bread temperature and demanding to speak with the manager before her appetizer arrived. When manager Tony Ricci politely offered to replace her meal, Brenda escalated the situation by throwing her wine glass against the wall, the crystal shattering as it struck the exposed brick. She stood on her chair to address the entire dining room, shouting accusations about the restaurant's service and demanding satisfaction for her treatment. In her dramatic performance, she gestured wildly with her arms while berating the staff and threatening legal action against the establishment. During her theatrical display, Brenda knocked over a large decorative wine barrel that had been positioned near her table as part of the restaurant's rustic Italian theme. The empty oak barrel, used purely for decoration but improperly secured to its base, tipped forward from her movement and rolled toward the wall. The barrel struck Brenda's torso and pinned her against the brick surface. The impact fractured several ribs and compressed her chest cavity, preventing her from breathing properly. Witnesses said she gasped once before collapsing to the floor. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but she was unresponsive and later pronounced dead at the scene. Emergency medical personnel arrived quickly, but were unable to revive her. The restaurant faced a wrongful death lawsuit from Brenda's family, though security footage clearly documented her aggressive behavior leading up to the accident. Other local establishments came forward with evidence of her pattern of fraudulent complaints, creating a complex legal situation. The lawsuit was ultimately unsuccessful, but Giuseppe's installed safety barriers around all decorative items and implemented staff training for handling difficult customers. Brenda's death became a cautionary tale in Charleston's restaurant community about the dangers of escalating customer service disputes. It was September 3, 2017, and the bustling atmosphere of a busy airport in Colorado created a symphony of rolling luggage, flight announcements, and thousands of travelers navigating the 1.5 million square foot facility. The Labor Day weekend had brought record crowds to the airport, with security lines stretching nearly 100 yards as TSA agents processed passengers through metal detectors and baggage scanners. Tammy Rodriguez clutched the nylon leash of her 15-pound peacock as she approached the security checkpoint, her fake service animal certification prominently displayed on a lanyard around her neck. At 39, the real estate agent had discovered that claiming her exotic pet was a medical necessity allowed her to bypass restrictions that applied to other travelers. She had purchased the fraudulent documentation online for $200, complete with official-looking seals and medical terminology that intimidated most business owners into compliance. Tammy's aggressive use of fake service animal laws had become her signature method for getting special treatment wherever she went. She had successfully bullied restaurants, hotels, and retail stores into accommodating her disruptive peacock by threatening discrimination lawsuits and making scenes that managers preferred to avoid. Her bird had already caused incidents by attacking other passengers on buses and defecating in shopping malls, but Tammy's legal threats had prevented any serious consequences. The peacock, named Napoleon, was completely untrained and had never received any legitimate service animal education. Tammy had chosen the exotic bird specifically because its unusual nature made people less likely to question her claims, and she enjoyed the attention and special treatment that came with having such an unusual companion. Her social media accounts were filled with photos of Napoleon in restaurants, airplanes, and other locations where pets were typically prohibited. Airport security had been warned about Tammy's previous attempts to bring Napoleon through checkpoints without proper documentation. She had been turned away twice in the past month, but each time she had returned with increasingly sophisticated fake paperwork and more aggressive demands for accommodation. As Tammy approached the TSA checkpoint, she immediately began filming with her phone, while demanding that Napoleon be allowed through security without the standard documentation required for legitimate service animals. She shouted at the TSA agent about discrimination against her disability, though she had no qualifying medical condition that would require a service animal. The TSA supervisor explained the federal regulations governing service animals in airports, but Tammy's voice grew louder and more aggressive as she insisted that her fake certification was legally sufficient. Other passengers in line began backing away as her shouting escalated, and Napoleon became increasingly agitated by the commotion. Tammy screamed about violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, her face red with rage as she waved her fraudulent paperwork at the security officers. The peacock began spreading its tail feathers and making loud calls that echoed through the terminal, drawing stares from hundreds of nearby travelers. Napoleon's stress response to Tammy's shouting triggered the bird's natural defense mechanisms. The large peacock suddenly bolted away from the commotion, its powerful legs propelling it forward with surprising force. Tammy had clipped the nylon leash to her waist, and as Napoleon fled, the sudden jerk spun her around violently. The force on the leash pulled it upward over her shoulder and under her chin. The nylon line cinched tight against her throat like a garrote, tightening further each time the bird thrashed. Other passengers watched in horror as she clawed at the leash, her face turning blue as her airway was compressed. Security officers rushed to help within seconds, But they had no cutting tool readily available, and Napoleon continued thrashing, making it difficult to approach safely. By the time they managed to free the leash from around her neck, Tammy had lost consciousness. Despite immediate medical attention from airport paramedics, Tammy Rodriguez was pronounced dead at 2:34 p.m. from asphyxiation. The incident prompted calls for stricter verification of service animal documentation and clearer guidelines for handling disruptive animals in airports. Napoleon was euthanized, and investigations revealed that Tammy had no legitimate disability requiring a service animal. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.